If things go wrong and your family leaves you and they despise you, you go to God, Lord, heal my marriage, heal my family. It's not God's responsibility. You have to do it. A very good morning to you, especially our Trinity family members. Thank you for joining me this morning. I pray that you are well and that God has His hand and watching over you all the time. My prayer is over all of you, especially our patrons, those that make sure that this word reaches wherever it needs to. And God is the driving force behind everything we do. Thank you so much for being a blessing to me and this ministry. Beloved, I know many of you follow my teaching and you earnestly desire to put into practice everything you hear. But sometimes, every now and again, the enemy tries to sneak in to destroy your peace, your joy, and your contentment, your happiness. And this morning is a time of self-reflection, because I'm going to help you to identify certain things in your life. You see, the decisions in your life that you are responsible for are the cornerstone to having happiness in your own life, contentment. And so we're going to do a little self-reflection this morning. And if you are heavily burdened and want to know the way out, the way God has planned for you to escape some situations that you might be in, I want you to pay very careful attention to the next hour that we're going to be speaking to you. And I say we because Nash and I together generate these thoughts, these sermons, so for you to absorb and benefit from. We're going to start by reading the second book of Timothy, a letter that Paul wrote to Timothy, the pastor. And he says, "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Now, when you read this, you'll, especially when spiritual teachers read this, they read it in the context of the word of truth being the Bible. Let's get that plain and clear to you, that when Paul wrote this letter to Timothy, there was no Bible for Timothy to study. So, as we learned previously, and I told you this, that the Catholics who translated the original words from Greek, a language in which Paul originally wrote this letter, when they translated it, they exchanged the word wisdom for the word word. And the reason they did that is because they wanted their congregations all over, wherever they expanded to, especially in Africa, to take the scriptures that they have put together to call the Bible. They wanted people to study the Bible, or use the term wisdom, replace it by the word word, so that when people read what they need to do to understand God better, they turn to the Bible and use the precepts of the Bible to conduct their daily life. But the actual word in Hebrew, or in Greek rather, is logos or logon, depend on which tense you're using and context. But both logos and logon mean wisdom. And we learnt that wisdom means Jesus. So if we read that, before I take you on any further teaching, if we read that and exchange that word for the correct word, let's read it again. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the wisdom of truth. So it doesn't mean the Bible. So when you hear ministers, teachers of the gospel today quoting this, it does not, remember this, it does not refer to the Bible. It refers to wisdom, or it refers to Jesus. So you have to study Jesus, you have to study wisdom, so that you can present yourself before God. So now that is out of the way, I'm going to go into the details of this line that was written in that letter by Paul. Let me preface by telling you that I'm going to read to you a few scriptures after this, and I want to see if you can identify the item of self-reflection that I'm going to address to you this morning. Let's first read. In the original Greek, this is what is written. Hasten yourself approved to present to God a workman. Ergaten is the Greek word for workman. Not ashamed, accurately handling the wisdom of truth. Now let's read that, and we put the correct interpretation of this verse, and we'll put it into English so that we can properly comprehend what Paul was trying to tell Timothy as a pastor of that church. So he says, hasten yourself approved to present to God. Ergaten. Now ergaten in Greek is the word which is figuratively a teacher. Not really workman in the terms of working or struggling to work or toiling. It means teacher. So ergaten means teacher. So here's it again. Hasten yourself approved to present to God a teacher, not ashamed, to accurately handling the wisdom of truth. Let's look at another word that's written there, spodasen. Spodasen means is the interpretation or the original word that Paul used. And spodasen means diligent or act imperative. Now, if you use the word imperative and you have to put it into proper context, it means command. So, act on this command immediately, urgently. So he says, hasten, act on my command urgently, Timothy, to approve yourself in the eyes of God, because you're presenting yourself to God as a teacher who is not afraid to offend anybody, because he can understand when he rightly interprets the wisdom of God or Jesus. So if you hear somebody teaching Jesus incorrectly, don't be afraid. Do it quickly. It's a command to correct that and make and rightly assess. So when you appear before God, you appear as a rightful teacher of wisdom. And beloved, over the last few years online, I've been trying to do that. I don't want to appear ashamed. So, over the last couple of weeks especially, I become bolder in my statements. And I expect that that the receiver of this information is able to use wisdom to comprehend it. So what do we learn from what Paul was commanding to Timothy? He says to Timothy, it is your responsibility, Timothy, to rightfully handle wisdom. You cannot be afraid. It's your responsibility not to be afraid. It's not God's responsibility. It's not my responsibility as Paul. It's not my responsibility as Minesh. It's your responsibility to handle wisdom so that when you present yourself before God, you are acceptable. So it's not about studying the Bible scriptures. It's about using wisdom to know right from wrong. Now that we know that there's certain aspects of wisdom that is ours to be responsible for, how we exercise wisdom. We're going to read to you the book of Hebrews. In chapter 4 it says, and there is no creature hidden from God's sight, his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. So when you are responsible for certain things, God can see it all. And at the end, there is no you and your wife going to stand together, or you and your children, or your uncle or your father. It's just going to be you alone that has to give an account before God for the way in which you handled truth or wisdom. Did you compromise? Did you ignore wisdom when it appeared before you? Or did you exercise wisdom even though it was hard to do so? This you have to do on your own. It is your responsibility. Psalms chapter 24 tells us this: the earth is the Lord's, and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. So God is the owner of everything that he made. He rightfully owns it. He's the chief of everything. But here in Genesis it tells us something even deeper. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and to keep it. So the owner has rights over the land, and then he told the servant to be the steward over his property. So the owner has all the rights, and the servant has the responsibility to look after and care for the owner's things. So this is owning the responsibility. We own the responsibility of taking care of the things of God. Everything that belongs to God, it is not his responsibility. He transferred it to Adam, which through all of time now has descended, the responsibility has descended onto you and me, who are God's children. He did not give that responsibility to products. He gave it to those that he breathed into. So I am not allowed to rule over everything and anyone however I feel like. Even the money that I have, even the possessions that I have, my house and my car, they all generated from the land which is owned by God. We are stewards of his property. Everything belongs to God. Your job belongs to God. Your finances belong to God. Your clothes belong to God. Everything belongs, even your children belong to Him. If they made from here, they've been given by Him, He is the owner of everything. And you are just the keeper of those things. You have no rights over those things. Only God, the owner, has rights over them. I hope you getting to understand certain principles. So there's going to come a time when you and I are going to stand before God, approved, rightfully dividing that wisdom, to give an account of our stewardship, to tell God that He has given us responsibilities and how we carried those responsibilities out. Because everything that we have and are His. Now let's look at Matthew 24. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is a faithful and wise servant? There's that word wise again. Whom his master made rule over his household, to give them food in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find doing so. So, you know, whatever you have, whatever you are, whatever you do, you cannot willy-nilly do whatever you think. There's free will to do something, but you have to bear in mind that you are not the owner. The owner left you with the responsibilities. I'm just getting that through. Matthew 25, it's a famous parable. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. You know, this is one of the principles I need to get out of the way and through to you. God knows the capabilities He put in each one of us. He is the one that placed us here. I'm not talking about products now. I'm talking about His children, the godly and the sinner. He knows what we are capable of, and He will never ask you to do something that is not within your means. And for this reason, because He gave each one different measures of gifts, He's given us the responsibility to exercise within our means. And for this reason, not everybody is going to have a lot of money. Not everybody is going to be super rich, because He gives each one according to the measure that He has designed for that person, according to that person's ability. So there is no get rich quick scheme with God. There is no come and give your 50 rand and you're going to get 1,000-fold blessing. It's not equal measure with everybody. Everybody has a certain limited responsibility. Some He knows has the capacity, and so He blesses them accordingly. But when He comes back, He's going to check on the items that He has given that person, and He's going to check how that person has handled his property, whatever it might be. So listen to me, the stewards, the servants, are not the one that chooses. God chooses what He gives to whom. The stewards is whatever He's given to be carefully responsible for. Using what? Wisdom. That's why Matthew says, who then is a faithful and wise servant? This is the preamble to the parable of the talents. Now, listen, we cannot ever go to heaven without knowing responsibility. So when you walk into heaven's gates, there will be different number of people who were tasked with different responsibilities. But there will not be any single one that will enter that place who was irresponsible, who abused the master's things, the master's earth, who didn't expand on what the master gave them. Now the parable of the talents clear that quite completely. So you have to add value to whatever the master, the owner of the land, has given to the steward. Now, when you conduct your life, when you come to the age of understanding, that is the time you usually get baptized. You cannot get baptized without making a conscious decision that you want to serve wisdom. And when you've come to that position, from then on, it is your responsibility. Listen, this is a heavy burden. It is the responsibility of the steward to make decisions that will affect the stewards using what? Wisdom. So God has implanted wisdom in us to give us the wherewithal to make the correct decisions. So at the end of the day, wherever our life ends up, you cannot blame anybody else, especially not God, because you have to take responsibility for where you are. If God put you in a home where there was no food and alcohol drinking and a whole lot of things that messed up your childhood, God has put inside of you the ability to escape that. So it is your responsibility to dig inside yourself, to find what God put in there, so that you can make it out, maybe with some scars, but coming out using the gift He's given you, the gift of resilience, the drive that He's put in you to prosper out of that dungeon, to come out. And some of you have miraculously and marvelously. You see, when God looks at that servant, He says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. I didn't give you the best of starts. In fact, I've given you the worst of starts. But you have not disappointed me. Well done." So, God gives you what you need, but He puts you in a certain circumstance so that He can take out what He put in. So, the responsibility, you can blame your mother and your uncles and your grandfather for everything that happened to you. But that's the name of the accuser. That's what Satan means. Satan means accuser of the brethren. So, if you are a person who constantly blames somebody for anything in your life, your other name could be Satan. So I don't want you to blame anybody about anything. You have to take the responsibility and say, no, I know I had a worse start than him, but God would have given me what it takes to come out from here. So I'm going to make that decision. I'm taking the responsibility. You see, if when you in this world for a while, and you came out of that dark place, and you did well, and you took out the very best in you, God looks down and He's proud of where you've come out of. And you start to climb up, and you start to own a business, and you start to make some decent money and live well. And somebody who maybe had even a better start than you, or maybe came out of where you came out, but they didn't take responsibility. No. They constantly had in mind to blame their father, they blamed their mother. When they went to school to punish the parents, they used to shirk their duties in school. They will come home and not study. They have the responsibility to make something of their life, but No, the easier route was to have fun with their friends. And when they didn't get the best pass, they didn't go to the best schools, and they didn't come out. But listen, you don't have to go to the best schools. Even if you think it's too late, you can still make tremendous progress. Some of the most successful people haven't even been to proper school, because eventually you start to take responsibility for your life. But when these people come out and they live beneath you, who have come out of so much of pain and agony, and you made something of yourself, when they look at you with envy. Some of them might even be your friend. And they think to themselves, what makes this man so special that he must live better than me? Aren't we all God's children? And so you get jealousy creeping in. You'll get envy creeping in. And listen, they'll smile at you. They'll pat you on the back. They'll laugh with you. They'll do all sorts of things. But hidden inside the heart will be a form of jealousy. And they will not take responsibility for their own progress. Listen, forget about what's happening to someone else's life. You look inward and say, what can I do that God has entrusted me with to come out of where I am and make something of myself? Make something of my marriage. What can I do? It is your responsibility to marry the person that God has intended for you to marry. He cannot give the person of his choice an uncooked person. So in order for you to be where God wants you to be, so that he can give his child the best person, you have to take responsibility for improving who you are. You can't be half-cooked. And I'm going to meet the angel of my life, the love of my life. I don't know why God is making me wait so long, because you're uncooked. You need to find that drive inside of you to make something happen for you in all aspects of your life. So that when you are ready, if it's designed by God, God can bring that person he is preparing. And that person is fully cooked already, waiting for you. So it's your responsibility. Now if you decide that the easiest way, I can't find anybody, let me find, this drug addict, or I can change him when I marry him. He's showing so much of love and interest in me, but he's got this drug habit. And then I fall pregnant and I have his child, and we get together just for that sake. Now 20 years later, when you have suffered for 20 years with this person, you go to God in prayer and you want God to take responsibility and sort the problem that you created. It is your responsibility to do everything you can to escape these things, to use wisdom to make decisions regarding your permanent life ahead. And when you use wisdom, you will be able to have the best outcome. But listen, it's all not lost. You go to God and you say to the Lord, now that I'm hearing what Pastor said, I'm taking responsibility, and please forgive me for not using wisdom. You see, at that time, when you have asked for forgiveness and acknowledged your blame in this, that's the time God starts to create paths for you to escape through. And then you use wisdom to recognize those paths. And that's when you can come out of wherever you are. You see, this is why you can't have a one-for-all blessing at a church meeting. You can't have a crusade to say, blessing to all. God is going to open the doors. Tonight is your night for a miracle. You see, you can't do that. The responsibility for God to take charge is not his. It's yours. When you have done what you need to do, only then can God intervene. You've got to learn to take responsibility. I hope wisdom is opening up in you. Tonight is the night of a special blessing. For all those marriages, listen, unless you take responsibility, there's no magic. And trust me, you've been through so many counseling sessions, so many marriage seminars. Nothing changes because you haven't taken responsibility for your role in everything that's going on. Even sometimes some of people might be listening to me. I hope my wife is listening to this. Secretly in your mind you're thinking, because she needs to take, no, forget about her. Your responsibility. How do you impact in this? So listen, if you don't take school seriously, that's your responsibility. You don't take studying, you don't take working seriously. You see, if you're at work and your manager shouts at you and you get angry and you just quit, now you're out of a job. Whose fault is that? Who is responsible for that? My manager. No. How you react is your responsibility. If you reacted by, God must open another door for me. There's something you've done and it's your fault. Sometimes you can go and say, Lord, I made a big mistake. It's my risk. I know, Lord, but please help me. That's when God comes in. But from then on, you have to use wisdom to create possibilities so that you can walk in God's favor. So you get these products that will stand from the pulpit and preach everywhere. And to attract other products and sinners, they'll want to offer this one for all blessing, this powerful handkerchief that will be blown on people. That a miracle is about to happen. You see, you cannot be gullible. You must have wisdom. Wisdom you have to protect with your life. Guard it. We preached before. Guard your wisdom. Guard that things that come into your ears. Guard the thoughts that you have. You see, you got to assess, is it really possible for God to do that for me just if I don't even make one change in my life, that God is going to do something? No, God is not silly. So listen, according to these products that are pastors and teachers, according to them, you can live anyhow you want. Treat God's property anyhow you want. And God will still bless you. This kind of thing is particularly ear-catching, tempting to those who always like the shortcut, to those who are not really keen on taking responsibility to make any changes. When you think of Eve, and some of us look back and we blame Eve, the devil presented, she should have known better. She has to take responsibility and God punished her for that. Responsibility for allowing temptation to overtake her. She not only that, but she cursed her entire line of family right up till where we're living now. But you cannot blame Eve, because the same kind of temptations happen to you every day. And most of us do exactly the same thing that Eve does. So in order to stay in God, it is our responsibility to keep sin out. Let me talk about, I'm all over the place with regards to responsibilities, but I hope that you are able to put these things into perspective in your own life. There's some people whose wives left them, whose children reject them, and they become alcoholics and they become wayward and they start to lose their job. And at the end, if they go for counseling, they're blaming the people in their lives. No, you can't. You have to take responsibility for how you've reacted. And when you understand how you reacted and you make changes to that reaction, it's called responsibility. Then your life can turn around. And if anything is expected for God to do, He can look at you and say, no, my son has taken responsibility, asked for forgiveness, and making changes on his own. He's taking it up, and God can start to mend and bring things in your favor, whatever His will might be. So being depressed is your choice. Being angry is your choice. You are responsible. Nobody else. Now this was I'm about to say happened in the last couple of years. You see, if you get sick and die because of a disease, if you get sick and bedridden and hospitalized, you have to take responsibility for not using wisdom. Because if you take yourself, and remember there's laws of physics and there's laws of the spirit, and each one works independently. If you take your healthy body and walk purposely into an environment that you know there's a potential for you to catch something, and you get sick from it, and your family members get sick, you have to own that decision. God, how can you not protect me? God says use wisdom. You know, there's a few people who follow me, watch and understand, and I'm just going to say this. They start to understand that they need to take control of their lives, take control of their emotions, take control of things. And there was a person there were a few, but I'm just mentioning one for now. There's a person that is still feeling like under attacks from the evil one. And they wonder why, Pastor, we're listening to you, we're following everything. But you see, some people choose to listen to some parts and not choose to listen to others. They don't want to exercise wisdom regarding anything they hear from me. So they don't rightfully separate the things that they hear. Because despite everything I've said, they still choose to go sit in a church to listen to messages that comes, and they're receiving ligands into them that is corrupting their head, and spirits that are lurking everywhere in and amongst the people around them. We don't even know whether there's a product that is preaching there, and they want to sit in a place just so that they can. Some that were part of my ministry longer, they got fed up now waiting for us to open. They just want to be somewhere. Listen, every fiber of my being wants to be with my people. Every fiber wants to embrace the atmosphere that we cherished so much. And despite the temptation to do that, wisdom tells me that while many people will be okay, there will be some who are immunocompromised that will not make it, and families will lose loved ones. And if we open for people to come and fellowship, my finances, the church finances, will increase tremendously. But I have to not worry about the financial gains or my personal desires. I have to use wisdom, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices to follow wisdom. And I am prepared to do that no matter what it takes. And when God releases a peace in my heart, but some people, because they're impatient, they just feel like, you see, it's not important to many people. I believe some of them were even products. It's not important for many people to receive substance to enhance their spirit. They just want to be present somewhere, to feel a part of something. So they can go anywhere, listen to anything. It doesn't really matter. They can sit any place, as long as it's called church. They can sit there. Whether they get what, it doesn't matter. They don't realize that, church is a spiritual thing. And we're dealing with the human spirit, and we're dealing with evil spirits and unclean spirits. We're dealing with dead spirits. We're dealing with all sorts of things. So where you take this body, you got to use wisdom. If you take it without wisdom and place it anywhere, the consequences are evil will follow you. So you can hear what I'm saying. You can try and absorb it, but if wisdom doesn't divide it, you're going to suffer the consequences. So what's happening to the person or anybody is because of their decisions. Their responsibility is theirs. That's why when somebody comes to me with demonic problems and all sorts of things, I have to first show them their responsibility. And that's the reason why when I do that, and many who are willing to take the responsibility upon themselves to make changes, they see results. Proverbs chapter 3. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. Now, I hate to bring these things in, but if I'm going to do a teaching, I need to do a full teaching. And please, do not start to honor God with your finances if it is through fear or intimidation or manipulation. You only honor God through regret or love. Lord, I regret not doing that. Please forgive me. I love you and I love your work and I love your kingdom and I need more people to be in your kingdom. That's the time only when you honor God with your substance. So I'm going to leave that as I continue. Proverbs chapter 6. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, if he must restore sevenfold, he may have to give up all the substance of his house. God gave us a glimpse of the heavenly principles when he gave Solomon these proverbs. And he said to Solomon, in my kingdom, this is the principle. If a thief is caught, now in that community people are starving, they have no money, sometimes you'll get one stealing from the other. He says if the thief is caught, don't despise the thief, please, because he is only stealing because he has no food. He says, but despite that, the reason for him stealing, despite the fact that he's stealing just because he's starving, he says even because of that, he still has to be punished. And if he is caught, he must give back 7 times more than what he stole. So if he stole a cabbage, he must give 7 cabbages back to the person he stole it from. Even if he loses his entire household doing it. It's written there. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Now if the thief that is caught, if let's say God, listen, I'm saying this because everything belongs to him. So when you earn, your substance goes to God. A percentage of it. We've got a guideline from the Old Testament that tells us, and I've read for you some scriptures, you commit that to the kingdom of God. Whoever is responsible for nourishing the content of your spirit, for feeding you spiritual food, that's where your tithe goes. And it's your responsibility to see to it that God's kingdom grows. He left that with the disciples, with the apostles. He says it's your responsibility to see to it that my word is preached throughout the kingdoms. And the people, it's your responsibility to support these apostles to make sure they go out and do it. So that's the order, the responsibility levels. Even in the Old Testament, he says to the priests, it's your responsibility to cleanse these people once a year and every week for different things. And it's their responsibility to bring offerings so that you can be taken care of in the temple. So everybody has a responsibility. Now to the church, the people, he says, your responsibility is to bring this to my house so that my servants can do my work. Now if the thief is caught, let's say you do everything about taking back control of your life, and you neglect that responsibility, you'll start to find that you might even prosper financially. But one day, something is going to pull that plug. And you'll have nothing. Some of you, God even gave you a warning a couple of times. But if that's not enough to repay what you withheld from God, then the devil, who is the accuser of the brethren, goes and says, Lord, this person is calling himself your child, but he's robbing you. And your principle says that if he doesn't have to cover that, he has to, even his whole household. So you start to see people start to get sickly, that money can't buy the healing. People start to get all sorts of things happening to them, and they wonder, Lord, I'm following everything, but what's your responsibility that you're not following? And because of that, you see, as soon as you mention this, people think that you after they fight. No, listen, this is a principle. I'm just sharing this with you. That's why I say to you, before what I said, do not give it out of fear that you're going to, I'm going to lose. God is going to punish me. Don't do. If you're doing it out of that, forget it. God is not even going to receive it. You do it because you realize it's my responsibility. And Lord, I love your kingdom. That's all. And you ask for forgiveness. He is ready to forgive. But if you're doing it for any other reason, God won't even receive what you're giving. So I'm telling you that now. You always give to God with love. 1 Timothy 5:8 tells us, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You see, we have a responsibility to provide for our families. And this is why you can't get angry when your boss shouts at you. This is why no matter how hard the work is, you cannot get drunk at work. You cannot take your money and go gamble the money that your child needs to buy school books and uniform and food for lunch and go gamble with it. It's your responsibility. If things go wrong and your family leaves you and they despise you, you go to God, Lord, heal my marriage, heal my family. It's not God's responsibility. You have to do it. So there is so much content. And listen, taking responsibility requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work. But when the master comes back to see the servant and he looks at the hard work the servant put in and the sacrifice that the servant has made, he taps you on the back, opens the kingdom, and welcome, my good and faithful servant. I want to hear that, Lord, more than anything. If people are in debt, some of you don't live within the means. There's greed involved. You want to own that Gucci handbag, those shoes that somebody else wants. Listen, they can afford it. But in order for you to get it, you want to use your credit card. And when you're in financial need, you look for the church that's offering a financial blessing. You don't want to take responsibility to change your spending habits. You don't want to take responsibility for anything. No. You want God to take responsibility to dig you out of that hole. Sometimes some people, when they make investments, they don't tell their wives because they know their wives will say it's unwise to do that. So they do it quietly, and when they lose everything, they wonder to themselves, let me look for Jesus. Some of them are unbelievers, some of them are products, some of them are sinners. They run to Jesus for a quick solution, and that's not what God does. Everything is yours. I want you to make changes. Proverbs 4:23, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. You see, if you guard wisdom, when you're making decisions to fight with your wife, to become depressed that someone has let you down, when you're making decisions to leave school, to fight with your manager and lose your job, when you're making decisions to argue in the presence of your children, when you're making decisions for anything that you want, you must do it using wisdom. And if you follow the path of wisdom, you see, the devil will lead you to make one wrong decision. For example, spend money that you don't have using your credit card to buy, just an example. And that will lead you down a hole into a place. And from there, everything crumbles. The devil just wants to make you lose wisdom just once. And he'll take you down a path that God won't take you out of. You have to take responsibility to take yourself out of. And this is why I'm sharing with you this self-reflection episode. I want you to look inside yourself and see, what do I have to do, Lord? Because once you embrace wisdom and you add your name, even if it wasn't there, to the book of God of life. You can rewrite it right now. Some of you that are listening to me, you just brush it off and you carry on life the way you are, running here and there for solutions to your problems without taking responsibilities. You actually might take your name out of that book because you reject wisdom of responsibility. So this morning, as I taught you this, I pray that this teaching helps you to find the solution to getting an answer to your prayer. Because I know many of you asked God, what, Lord, do I need to do to get a solution to this? And God is saying to you, look within yourself. Use wisdom. Listen, this is why I am here. All of God's children who have placed their lives in my care, your spirits, you are at liberty to say, Pastor, I am stuck. What is the wise thing to do? And sometimes the things I ask you to do or lead you to do are not easy. But if you prepare to do what wisdom dictates, the light will shine at the end of your tunnel the moment you start to implement it. And this is God's word for you today. Can I pray with you? Heavenly Father, I thank you for the glorious gift of wisdom. Jesus, as you live inside of us as wisdom, you give us direction. You nudge us into the correct paths to take. Let us begin to embrace that little voice of yours that speaks within us. And Lord, let no temptation that is common to man overpower us. From wherever dungeon we have come out of, lead us out into victory. And let us have peace, joy, and happiness in our marriages, at our workplace, wherever we are, Lord. Cover us with your blood. Every child at school, every child wherever they are, your blood will cover them and protect them as well. From this age, let wisdom reign through them, so that their path may be carved out with wisdom. I cover them all, Lord, in Jesus' name. Everybody said, Amen. I pray that you had a blessed day. I pray that I'm going to see you next week, or you're going to see me. God bless you. Have a great week.